Now, cooking for kids and families never end. And yes, it's very easy just to order in, especially here in the UAE. But that's not always the healthiest option. So with me now is Kripa Deani, also known as the 15-minute Mom. She's an expert in nutrition science. But by day, she is a family coach. And as a mom of three, she's here to give us her top tips when it comes to sneaking in those healthy veggies and nutrients into your kids' foods. Welcome, 15-minute Mom. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
We're going to keep you on longer than 15 minutes, so,
okay.
so that's good. So I just found out that you know a really good friend of mine from university. So you were born and brought up in Portugal.
That's correct.
Lived in London, and now you're settled here in Dubai?
That's correct, yes.
What age did you leave Portugal?
25, actually.
So where about in Portugal?
I was born and brought up in Lisbon and educated there as well. And then I met a very handsome, charming man that took me to the UK, and that's where I had my 3 children. But pretty much most of my life, 25 years of my life in Portugal.
It's interesting because I don't know you're the first Indian that I know who's actually grown up back in the day in Portugal. So when you were growing up in Lisbon, was it, I'm assuming, a lot of seafood, fresh food, or was there a lot of imported and exported food?
Okay, so the irony of the situation is that we were brought up vegetarian in the most beautiful coastal country. As a
Part of your culture.
Part of the culture, yes, absolutely. And we didn't experience all that beautiful food back then, but the produce in Portugal is primarily organic.
Yeah.
And still is. A lot of it is still very much organic. So it's a largely agricultural country. So a lot of the produce is made within the country. And it's interesting because when we go back and when the children go back, you can really taste the difference.
Yeah. Amazing. Now, tell me what you do as a family coach.
Okay, so there's a few sort of branches out of the concept of being a family coach. I work with families with this concept called Family Forum, and I introduce this, what I like to call a new ritual within the family. And this is a great way of opening lines of communication from a very young age. So it's tapping into the children's emotional intelligence, being able to articulate their emotions in a safe space with their parents, but in a very non-judgmental, we as parents have this tendency of giving an opinion or trying to fix things for our children. So the structure is designed so that parents are there in sort of the same equal positioning as the children, and they are there as listeners and not as advice givers.
How old are your kids?
So I have 3. I have a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old tomorrow, and a 6-year-old.
So your 13-year-old's probably close enough in age to my 17-year-old niece, and she has her own mind. It's like, I know that if my mom gave me advice, I'd listen to it, whereas my niece thinks she knows everything. And I don't know, these generation of kids, they're quite firm in their thinking. It's hard to sway them in many ways.
Absolutely, but how can we blame them? This is what we're trying to give them, resilience. We're trying to make them independent. And then when they turn back around at us with all that independence, we then, okay, hold on. What do we do with all this, right? So yes, these are great qualities in children, I think. And it's managing it in a way that taps into the emotion of the child rather than trying to, as a parent, always intervene or tell them. Language is, first of all, the most important thing when it comes to children in general, even with food.
And the tone. The tone, oh my
100%.
God. My mum can say my name in 10 different tones and I know what they mean.
We know when the full name comes out, you're in trouble.
Exactly. So with this emotional intelligence that you're learning, how does that link to when it comes to food, nutrients, nutrition, keeping them healthy? How have you intertwined those?
Again, it's also very much down to language. So if we start with a very young age range, children tend to be what we call picky eaters, and some more than others. And it's often difficult to entice a child to eat something as a parent that is high in nutrition, good for them. And then we end up succumbing to the options that are probably not as nutritious. So language is really important, but also understanding the psychology of the child. So I always like to give this analogy. In us adult life, probably the most crucial, stressful moment of the day is that morning when we need to get them out of the house in time, beat that traffic because those 5 minutes are going to make the difference, especially now in Dubai, and get them to school and then get to work or wherever we need to be. In their world, the most crucial thing is the color of the cup.
Oh my goodness, you're so right.
Right?
Yeah.
That is their realm. And we underestimate that ability of the child to process information. So we all have, development stages. And the brain development stage for a fully developed brain is at 25.
No
Imagine.
way.
Absolutely.
God, we've been stupid for a long time then, haven't we?
Exactly. That's why we make all these wonderful mistakes when we're teenagers. And so for a child to be able to process that information and not turn around and make a tantrum because they wanted the blue cup, not the yellow cup, is actually very normal in their space, in their mind space.
But it's so difficult. Let's say if you're a mum or a dad in the morning and you're stressed and you're getting ready and I want the blue cup. You're like, it's in the dishwasher. It's hard to stay calm.
It's very hard to stay calm. So one of the key things that I work with families is learning how to empathize in that situation. And it's actually hard work, having said that. It's not something that can innately come to people. And but it is quite logical and intuitive. So
But let me just stop you there. What about that bit where, let's say I'm a kid and I want a blue cup. You said, no, you have to have the yellow. You also have to teach them they can't have everything they want to.
100%. 100%. But at that moment, that precise moment where the tantrum is ready to come, we need to outweigh, right, what is the outcome I want right now? Do I really want to educate my child in this exact instant?
A quarter to 9 before school,
Yeah,
quarter
that you're
to
not
8.
going to get what you want? Or do you want to choose that battle and have that conversation a little bit later and have that child at school on time and you back to your routine?
What are some other challenges that you had when it came to making sure that your kids ate right? Because like you say, children are picky. I remember... I don't remember being picky about anything. I pretty much eat everything. And I think growing up in an Indian family in a Western world, we had a mixture of all kinds of food. So we were used to it, whether it was spicy, whether it was herbs, whatever, fish and chips,
Yes.
And one of the things I always remember this, and I still do it to this day. My mom, when my baby brother was born and he started eating, she'd mash broccoli, carrots and potatoes, mash it properly, add butter. So he just thought he was eating potatoes. And I was like a little rat on the side. Anything he didn't finish, I must have been 7, I would finish it. To this day, I love mashing my vegetables like that.
You're a mom's dream.
I was my mum's dream. I hope I still am. I'm not sure. But yeah, so my mum used to do things like that. And it's about hiding what's in the food, I suppose, because a lot of kids go through different stages.
Yes, it is. I think, again, it's choosing your battles. What is the end outcome? You want your child to get that nutrition. You want those vegetables to get into your child. So if your child is not going to eat that piece of broccoli in its intact form, that little mini tree, we call them sometimes, then by all means, hide it. Hide it in the food. They're still getting the nutrition. They're enjoying their food. Because at the end of the day, what you don't want to build is resentment towards that food. When you start having that battle, there will come a point where your child will not touch that food.
So this is interesting. My friend to this day cannot look at mashed potatoes because her teacher would force her to eat
Exactly.
it. And that's the thing that can affect a child as an adult.
Yes, absolutely. And so I always say, persist, don't insist.
Oh, I like that.
So keep going. Take it in another form. Maybe put some batter around it, stick it in the air fryer. Get your vegetable in whichever way your child prefers. And if they don't like it, try again a little bit later.
Okay, well, now if you have any questions about your kids and eating habits, you can text us on 4001. Kripa here. The 15-minute Mom is going to help answer all your questions. I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks and some recipes next.
Eat well, live well.
So we're finding out how to sneak in those healthy veggies and nutrients into your kids' food, especially if they're very picky. I'm talking to Kripa Deani. She's an expert in nutrition science. She's also a family coach, and she's giving us top tips. And she's also known as the 15-minute Mom on Instagram, where she gives us loads of tips. Now, any top tips for moms and dads listening right now that you can share with us when it comes to these picky eaters, the kids?
Yeah, so I think one of the top tips I can give is making food fun. The whole battle that we're picking a lot of battles throughout the day. And a lot of the time we're living with things like mom guilt, and we're trying our best. So that's one thing that I always say, please leave the mom guilt aside. Make things fun.
And you know what I remember always when I was a kid being fun? The curly whirly straws. Mm-hmm. So that's fun. And that stays with me to this day.
Exactly. So I'm going to give you an example. My 6-year-old, this was about 2-3 years ago. So he was, around 4. He was very picky. And my girls obviously were, already a little bit older, eating better. And so we made up this game. And it had to be in the language of, he's a boy, so it had to be fun for him. And it was called the Yucky Food Challenge. Okay. So we made a poster that started off with 10 yucky foods that he would never touch. Yeah. And the game was me and him would have to try the yucky food and rate it from 1 to 5. And asparagus was
you
one.
have a lot of patience.
Well, I have a teaching background. Okay. So this was hilarious because it started off with 10 items, ended up with 100 items because he got so enthusiastic about adding random things that he'd hear or pick up from school, or foods that he would go and look up. And it was really interesting because asparagus, which is one that I think most children would think is a yucky vegetable, he rated 3. And the next time we ever saw asparagus, there wasn't this horror, towards that vegetable. We tried things like sesame seeds. So it became a fun game. So I always say, playing around food. The other tip I can give is using food knowledge. So I used to have a lot of play dates at home, as most moms do. And this child came home and didn't like blueberries, and I was in shock. Which child does not like blueberries, right? And so I played a game with him and I said, you know what? Your tongue is going to go blue if you eat this magic ball. It wasn't a blueberry, it was a magic ball. The kid's like, no. I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you, don't tell your mom. We tried a whole load of them, went to the bathroom. Fair enough, his tongue had gone purpley blue. That's it. That was the start. It's so funny because his mom still calls me and says, thanks to you, my child eats blueberries. So it's kind of making up these stories. It does take energy. It does take creativity, but children do. And also there are days where we don't have that patience, but then let go.
So on your Instagram, what will people find? Do you put recipes up as well?
I do. So my Instagram is to motivate parents, motivate moms, but it's somehow become also a great motivational platform for university students. So anybody that wants to cook from scratch. Healthy, but in 15 minutes. So all recipes, the idea is them being very quick, made in 15 minutes with ingredients that you can hopefully get in your local Carrefour or Tesco. And it is all about making life easy.
So I want to know, we've had a few texts in, and Sarah says, my 2-year-old is currently going through a phase where she grabs the small butter packages at restaurants, literally eats the whole lot. They're only small. Is she lacking something why she's craving butter? Is there something or will she get over it? It's just a phase.
It can be a phase, but I think sometimes children do things to call for attention as well. So is there anything underlined? Is it because it triggers an emotion in the mom, or does the mom tell her off about that? So now often it can be associated to that emotion. But funny, my child used to do that too and has grown out of it. So it is something they can easily grow out of.
And they do change from kids. Like you get so stressed thinking they're not eating veggies. And then suddenly when they get I know my niece, she's hyper healthy now. And maybe it's because she's growing into a teenager. So it just changes. So I think our stress makes them stress too.
100%. Yes. And again, it makes that situation repeat itself more often. So it's not bringing so much attention to it, and possibly could be a solution, but also understanding that maybe it is either an attention-seeking situation, or genuinely the child's enjoying butter, and a little bit of saturated fat is not going to kill the child.
Well, my motto is listen to your body. That's what I've always done, which is why I look the way I do, probably. Now, how do I combat sugar cravings? This is from Rhea. She says, my 6-year-old always has to have something sweet after school, and I assume it's because she's tired and needs some energy. Now, I get that. I used to, as soon as I'd get home from school, my mum would make us food because we were tired and hungry.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sweet stuff, how can we replace that? What can we do?
Okay, so before going into the replacement, I have the same issue, of course. We all go through it. And I play a little game with my children. For every sweet thing they need to have 1 glass of water first.
I should do that as well.
So when we go to, for example, the chains of cafe chains where all that you see is cakes and pastries and all those goody things, we have this game where you have to have a glass of water. What this does is it satiates them a little bit because they are also thirsty. Often thirst and hunger are, interlinked or confused.
And I didn't know this. And when I found this out, I actually lost weight because I realized I was snacking rather than knowing I was hydrated.
Yes. And then their bellies are little. After having that 1 glass of water, they're already half full. Then you do give them something sweet because it's very hard to say no immediately for a lot of parents. I tend to have vegetable sticks in my bag and say, we're going to go for the treat, but in the meanwhile, have this. And if they're really hungry, they will have cucumbers or apples or celery sticks or whatever your child likes in form of veggie sticks. And there's a lot of science behind vegetables before carbohydrates.
I've heard this as well,
in terms of, insulin regulation. But if they have that glass of water, the tendency of eating that whole muffin is probably halved. They're probably going to manage half the muffin, which is what I used to see. And eventually they might just go off the idea. But slowly, slow steps.
Amazing. So how can people contact you if they want some tips, advice, or want to come and see you as a coach?
So I'm not currently coaching as a nutritionist as such, but I give a lot of free advice on my Instagram. My Instagram.
She does. Her Instagram is amazing. Tell everybody what it's called.
It's called 15min Mom. So 15min_mom, the American way. And that's a joke because I sound American and I'm not American.
Yeah, and she's got some great tips there. And you got a great following. So I was watching it today, getting some tips off her as well. But Kripa, thank you so much for coming in. And I'm sure we'll get you in again soon.
Thank you.
And I will drink the water every time I have a dessert. I've got a whole tray of desserts here.
Perfect.
A lot of water is on the way.
Your ARN News.